to another episode of the Practice Odyssey. I'm Jen.
And I'm Alex.
And together we have embarked upon the challenge of that omnibus, a Piccolo practice book, by Trevor Y and Patricia Morris. So for those who are just joining us for the first time this week, welcome. And also what we basically do is a little bit sadistic, but we inflict upon ourselves to try and work through one flute technique book every fortnight and kind of just give it a whirl, see how it goes. But this season we thought we'd do something different, and we are focusing on auxiliary instruments. So this isn't the concert flute, which is the one you regularly see performed, but the other flutes, maybe the Piccolo, which is the tiny, tiny one, very high, very sad for your neighbours if you play it, or the alto flute, which is a little bit more loved by your neighbours, probably because they can't hear it. Yes, anyway, so that's this season. This fortnight was a beast. Practice, the Piccolo practice book by Trevor Y and Patricia Morris, two very big names in the flute world. Alex, I think you looked up a little bit about the people who wrote it and also the book itself.
I did.
What did you discover?
So I read up on Trevor Y and Patricia Morris. So we'll start with Trevor Y, the English flautist. For those keeping track, this one, he spells his name with F-L-A-U, not F-L-U. Mm-hmm. He began playing the flute at the age of 15, and contrary to what might be expected of a famous flautist, Y did not attend a college of music, nor a conservatory, nor a university. But he did study with Marcel Moïse, which kind of makes up for that.
Well, that's like a university in itself.
Exactly. And Y credits him as the major influence on his playing, teaching, and his writing career. And you can definitely see that reflected in his books because there are exercises. And as we know or as any previous listeners know, Marcel Moïse wrote a lot for the flute as well in terms of exercises and methods.
Absolutely.
Yes. He also studied with the flautist Geoffrey Gilbert, and he was influenced. He also states that he was influenced by British singer Alfred Deller and flautist William Bennett, another very famous British flute player. Y was a freelance orchestral and chamber player in London for many years and has several solo recordings. He served as a professor at the Guildhall School of Music London for 14 years and the Royal Northern in Manchester for 22. And even though he didn't attend college himself, he was awarded an honorary degree in 1990 from the Northern College of Music in Manchester. So he did get a degree even though he did not have to study. Trevor Y is probably best known for all of his published works, including the 6-volumed practice books for the flute, which concentrate on tone, technique, articulation, intonation, vibrato, breathing and scales, and advanced practice, may be referenced later in this podcast. He has also published a series titled A Beginner's Book for the Flute, a Piccolo practice book, and several arrangements for flute and piano. And he also has a biography of Marcel Moïse that he has published in several languages and has an ongoing collaborative project of Encyclopedia of the Flute. So it's a little bit about Mr. Y. Now, Patricia Morris, or I'd say Mr. Trevor Y is more known for his general flute repertoire and flute knowledge. Patricia Morris is very much a piccoloist, which is great because they collaborated together on this book. So she studied the flute on an open scholarship with Geoffrey Gilbert at the Royal Manchester College of Music, and she has since specialized on the piccolo in the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra and then the BBC Symphony Orchestra. And she's given a number of solo recitals and masterclasses and has freelanced with major London orchestras. She currently teaches at the Royal Academy of Music, where she gives piccolo lessons and orchestral study classes. And outside of this practice book for the piccolo, she has also written a piccolo study book, which for my American friends maybe might be kind of that might be kind of confusing because study also means like, oh yeah, I'm studying for an exam. So like maybe there's a bunch of stuff, but they mean in this instance, a piccolo study book, as in it goes over etudes and studies therein.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's quick summary of our two writers of this method. So the breakdown of this book. First, maybe I can get a nice little sound effect in here for post. So here. Oh, yeah. One? Almost. Wait for it. That's the sound of the book hitting my desk. It is a hefty 211 pages of piccolo wonderfulness. It is, of course, separated into sections, 8 of them in total. The first section is tone and intonation, followed by articulation. Then we have a section on high register. He titles it Tunes at the Top, and I just love that. Special fingerings comes after that, grace notes and well-known tunes. I love that he has a section called harmonic fingerings and Tchaik 4. For the non-classical musicians, Tchaik is short for Tchaikovsky. So Tchaik 4 gets its own section. And followed, the last section is a nice little coda full of like a workout routine, auditions, rep lists, purchasing instructions, and going on. So that was the book, and that's what we've done for the past 2 weeks. So without further ado, Jen, how was your week 1?
Yeah, my week 1. Okay, yes, like you, the sound of the book hitting my desk reverberated throughout the building due to its heft and size. It's intimidating just straight off the bat. And then you go through, you just have like a bit of a glance through for the overview. Just the table of contents in itself is terrifying. It seems to be very, very methodical and many sections, and each section has its purpose, which now that you say that he, Y learned with Moyes, that makes a lot more sense that he would write and structure the book this way, because Moyes was also very into detail and creating lots and lots of exercises in a very methodical way. He was pretty brilliant at that, actually. So I can see how that's influences come through into the way Y has structured this. Okay, so I open up this enormous book and I'm looking at the contents and I read the first page, and there's some differences immediately to the one which we've done before. It says it's predominantly a orchestral instrument, very different to our friend,
Mr.
our dear friend, Mr. Beaumodier, who was very strong in his opinions that it was a solo instrument in its own right. So already we have a very big difference in how we're tackling the piccolo in this book. So all of the music in it's purely orchestral excerpts. And it says, if you're experienced in playing on the piccolo, start at the beginning and work your way through the book. So I thought, okay, here we go, page 1, fantastic. I have played piccolo before, but I was trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who's just picked up the piccolo and has opened this book. Okay, section A. It's got a very nice exercise in the middle register. If you listen to our previous podcast about the piccolo, the middle register is one which I find quite nasty on the piccolo. It doesn't really speak very clearly on my piccolo, and it's quite muffled. So you have to get your embouchure just right to really get it to ring and sound sweet like the rest of it. So this was good. It helped set my embouchure. And then the exercises were nice, where we kind of moved through intervals from the same note, getting wider and wider and wider, so testing the embouchure and getting it nice. So I enjoyed that. And then, all of a sudden, bang, we're right into orchestral excerpts.
Right off the bat.
Right off the bat. The first two are okay. Okay, we've got a bit of the Enigma Variations by Elgar. It's not too fast. A little bit of thirds going up in a scale. Quite nice, okay. As a beginner piccolo player, this is great. The second one, Mother Goose Suite. This is the most frequent excerpt I have played on all of the orchestral auditions I have ever done. It's deceptively difficult, so I was a bit surprised that it was number 2, but that's okay. Then we got straight into Tchaikovsky, was number 3, and it went at 168 beats per minute, and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm sorry, I've just picked up the piccolo and I'm expected to play like a virtuosic Tchaikovsky 4th movement finale. Anyway,
yes, listeners, I'll put a link into a YouTube video or something so you can listen to how fast this goes.
and it's really hard because it's like all offbeat and it's middle register, so you have to get it to speak clearly really fast with not much gap. It's a nasty excerpt. Anyway, we continue on with some more, but I won't get... Anyway, basically, Alex, I got bogged down pretty much from page 3 trying to, like, getting these excerpts. And I wasn't sure. It's like, how much do we learn how to play them? Like, are we perfecting them up to the point of where we would for an audition? Or is it kind of to get the gist and the general feel and not aim for like as perfect as we can get it before moving on to the next one? Anyway, so this is where I got stuck because I tried to play them as best as I could within a week, but progress was slow to get it to 176 and get all of the details right. Anyway, so eventually we kind of crawled through. Also got stuck on the 3rd movement of Stravinsky that was a little noodle there. And then, of course, finished off with Scheherazade by Rimsky-Korsakov. Again, at a beautiful 1 million miles per hour. Anyway,
I know, I had to say, I was very surprised they were in the section titled Tone and Intonation. Like, here, focus really on the purity of the sound in the middle register. Make sure that the going between octaves is very clear and crisp. Okay, great. You've got this at quarter note equals 66. Now let's just go quarter note equals 168, which is
160 billion. But I think really my first week, Alex, was, I think, one of shock. It's good, but I think I would have liked some more of those instructions about, like, what you really wanted to get from this excerpt. What was the tricky thing about this excerpt? What were you aiming for with this excerpt? And when you managed to do what they mentioned in that excerpt, that was really the big challenge and point of including it. So now you could move on to the next bit. That was I think what I struggled with the most in week 1 was just the sheer shock of the technical difficulties, especially when the first page says, if you're beginning on the piccolo. I was like, Jesus.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been playing the piccolo for a couple of years and this is hard. Anyway, not that I'm a very industrious piccolo player, but that was my first... Yes, that was my week 1, Alex, was shock and awe. Shock and awe. I was like, whoa, these guys are hard taskmasters. All right, let's knuckle down.
I'm so glad.
Anyway, Alex, how was yours?
I'm so glad that you spend so much time with the excerpts because I went a completely different route, which I'm glad now we can compare. Okay. Yeah, because so I looked at his section and I was like, 8 sections. 2 weeks, trying not to get flashbacks of, my favorite T&G, Taffanel and Gorbea. And I was like, you know what? Don't have a lot of time. This covers a lot of area. What can I do? So he says in his table of contents, on page 17, he has daily practice techniques. So I was like, okay, skip over everything. All of what you had to go through. And I went to page 17 and he says, okay, so practice the first 6 exercises as a warm-up, then turn to practice book 1, Tone, which is not this book. That is referencing his other book, his Flute Omnibus, and then gives you a few exercises in there to do. And then he says, it would also, then he says, do some Baroque sonatas, which is a common theme with this piccolo playing. It's often referenced in these books. I've noticed that also in the first piccolo method that we did, Bomadia, he also recommended Baroque exercises. And then he says, it would also be good to, look at how to buy a piccolo, which I was like, okay, let's compare. What are everyone's advices for piccolo purchasing.
Yeah.
But the problem with this is what I found was that it's not super clear where exercises are in this book. They're very much interspersed, kind of similar to what Mr. Beaumadier did. So I had to like take little markers and color each one. Because he says like exercises 1 to 6, and I was able to find those. And then later he references 7 to 10, but I could only find 7. So I'm not sure where 8, 9, and 10 are. Maybe I just didn't get far enough in the book. But initially I was already slightly annoyed because it's like, oh, okay, well, here's this book, and it is a very hefty book, like we said. There's a lot of information in there, but like there's also just a lot of excerpts in here. So if you want to use this book as a practice book, you need his omnibus, because that's where a lot of the exercises are. So that was, I mean, there's nothing wrong with this. Of course, lots of other authors do this as well, referencing. And it probably saves, if you already have the omnibus, why waste more trees and print it in this book? So what I did is for week 1, I spent, also, can I say, I really liked his reference of the demented banshee. The analogy, a nice little Easter egg for readers once you get there in the book. And yes, like you said, Jen, how he is definitely not in the camp of Mr. Beaumadier. He was definitely like so Mr. Beaumadier used like the piccolo as an instrument in its own right. It's basically the violin, but a piccolo. And he is definitely like the flute is the piccolo is an auxiliary instrument, and you should warm up before getting to it. So for this week, I did not do what I did for the first week with Mr. Beaumadier's book, where I just played piccolo. I did do it where I first warmed up and got to the high register of the flute, and then I switched to piccolo, which was fun. But again, it's not super clear-cut how to do that in this book. He's not like, okay, go start exercises 1 to 3 in my omnibus. That'll get you up to a nice high register, and then switch over to exercise 1 in my piccolo book, which I think for us is no problem. We can figure out a warm-up on our own, but for beginners, they might be a little confused as to, okay, where does that go? Yeah, he also starts the warm-up in the low register, which was different than Mr. Beaumadier as well. So he started his... Register? Yeah, like he starts his kind of with the lows and to the mid, but his book starts with middle register, tone, and information, but it's all very kind of low, whereas, sorry, I keep referencing the other one, but that was the other piccolo method that we've done on this season, in this season of the podcast. But I remember spending a lot of time in the upper register at the very beginning of my practice, like switching between the middle and upper register, whereas I felt like this one was more middle to lower register, which was better for my neighbors probably. But I noticed that my slight hesitation towards the upper register was creeping back into my practice. So whereas I think before it was just kicked out immediately, like, okay, well, we're doing this, it's going to be high. And then the bit about buying a piccolo, that was really interesting. I liked that so many people have that section in their books for these auxiliary instruments, but I liked how what he said isn't dated as quickly, because I feel as though when you write that in a book, I mean, what good information now, like if you reference a certain type of flute or piccolo, the technology might be updating and everything rather quickly, and it could be out of date very quickly. Like, for example, nobody goes to Taffanel and Gobert to look at their flute purchasing information because it was the 1800s the 1900s, and it's no longer really applicable. But what he says, what Trevor or Patricia say in this book is that it's they say that before buying it, always talk to an expert, which I think is good. I don't think I've seen that often in print. It's like, okay, before you buy something, talk to someone who's an expert in the field, because then your information will never be outdated. And then he also gives good pointers for how to get the best out of the piccolo buying experience, which includes warming up at home on your flute before going in, which makes total sense. And I think maybe a lot of people forget that step when buying an instrument. Like, make sure you're all warmed up and then go in, and then you're already kind of in the flute playing mode, and then if you're nervous being around so many other people you don't know and being handed $20,000 and $30,000 instruments one after another, you can try and focus more on the music instead of just all the nerves and anxiety or anything that comes with trying out different instruments for the first time. So I really liked that as well. So I would say my first week, I read a little bit about that. I focused on one of his I only focused on one excerpt because I saw he had so many and I was like, well, there's no way I'm going to get to all of these in 2 weeks. I'll try and focus on a few. And I love that he had Mother Goose in there because, as you said, that is on almost every list that I've done for Piccolo. I love his like first 3 pages and there's already a Firebird excerpt, which is like one of the harder ones.
Hardest.
But yes, and Scheherazade as well, like not holding back at all.
At all, no.
Yeah. So I focused on the Beethoven Symphony No. 5, 4th Movement 1 in the first section, which was kind of fun because I haven't played that one as much as I would have thought. But anyways, that's what I focused on. Was not too crazy, some 16th notes, but I liked how it moved between the 2 registers a little bit. And I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, that was my first week. I kind of just I spent some time in the Piccolo book, but I would have to say a lot of my practice time was spent in the Y Omnibus, and then I would come back for the excerpts in this book. So, which was only one. But yeah, that was my week 1. So I think that leads us, Jen, to your week 2.
My week 2.
Your week 2.
Okay, my week 2. Basically, I guess I must have been getting the vibes from all the way from Germany because week 2 I threw out the method of week 1. I was like, okay. I am not going to get anywhere. So I decided to approach it in more of a study book for excerpts and take it in that respect. Because one thing I really love about this book is he gives you all of the metronome markings most commonly used in orchestras today.
He does.
Which is great because, often, sometimes when you're first listening to a piece, you don't realize that the orchestra has decided to go a very adventurous artistic route and play it twice the speed of which it's normally played. And then you sit there going, holy cow, how will I play this at 1 billion miles per hour? Or on the flip side, maybe they decide to do an extremely sleepy version of Debussy's L'Après-midi d'une Faune.
Kill the flute
so
player.
much so that he's practically in a coma. Like, it's so slow and your breathing just dies. But so I liked how... I really liked how they've got this standard kind of metronome marking. So basically, I went back to the beginning, to the contents page, and I looked at the sections, and I decided, you know what, today I'm going to focus on playing very high, very softly. Ooh. And so I went to that section, and then he has some exercises about how to practice that, and so I practiced that for a while, and then I would go into one of the excerpts which uses that technique a lot in it. What I did is I would pick a different section every day. So one day I would do the playing very high, very softly, and then the next day I would be playing high, very loudly, and then the next one would be articulation, and so I would pick an excerpt which kind of tackled those areas and I would focus on it in that way. Yeah, the ones I really enjoyed was some of his experiments or the experiments. Who knows who's done these experiments? Could be Y, could be Morris. But with the idea of with your lips closed, blow with enough airspeed to part the lips. So, and then no harder than the absolute minimum. I really enjoyed that, like taking the notes to the extreme, so that you know exactly how little air you need and how relaxed your embouchure can be before the sound is produced. And then that really, I noticed a big difference in my playing, that all of a sudden my pianissimos up high could become a lot quieter than they had. I mean, I've got a long way to go, but a big kind of improvement in that area quite fast. But so I'm quite excited about working on that a little bit more. And then the loud playing up high. But the one which really got me was the articulation one. It's like, okay, now you're going to play this piece. So it's it's Shostakovich, fourth movement. Basically, it's 20 bars of high A's.
I've played that before. It's the worst. I just took it down.
And this is the one sentence above it. This is to check your stamina. Yes, it does. so much stamina required. And it's like a quaver at an eighth note at 184 beats per minute. So it just goes on and on and on. Da 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 da. Not quite that fast, but almost. And it just goes on for 20 bars. Where do you breathe? Your articulation dies. Oh my gosh. Anyway, so that was very good. So that was also my little project. Was, will this get any better over the week?
And
moderate success. I think I might need a few more weeks to get a bit better. Wow. I was like, cool, blimey. Also, I felt a bit sorry for my neighbours. So you've played this one?
I did, with a wind symphony version of it, which there's already like tons of winds in there. Yeah, and I was on Piccolo, and I thought it was a typo. I was like, no, because I was young and naive. I was like 18, 19. No. So very shameless me, I just took it down the octave, which is still pretty high, and you could still hear it on the recording.
Yeah, it would cut across, yeah.
Yes, but now that you say that, I realize the 18-year-old me was very misinformed, and it is indeed the octave. Thank you, Jen.
You're welcome for taking you down that horrible memory lane.
Yes, and knowing
that welcome.
I've been doing it wrong for the last 10 years.
Alex, how was your week 2?
Okay, so my week 1 was pretty leisurely. I just spent a lot of time in the omnibus. Well, just on one excerpt. Because I took his in. So I decided for week 2, I should make it a little trickier. So I went to section H, and I looked at a workout routine. Because he's got, in the table of contents, he's got daily practice, and he's got a workout routine. And so I was like, okay, I like my workout challenges. Let's see what that is. So then I
never got that far. How intriguing.
Oh, yes, it's only 2 sentences.
Oh, okay. No, I'm not so intrigued. Okay, no, I am intrigued.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's still intriguing. But he just says, basically, after like all of this practice, it's a good idea to use these extracts from Shostakovich 4 as a workout to check up on your progress. So basically he said...
That sounds right.
It's basically like the equivalent of like, okay, burpees are really good for you. So as a workout regime, you should just do like insane burpees for 30 minutes to 2 hours a day, and then you'll be in super fit shape, which is often the case. Yes, if you do burpees for 20 minutes, you're going to be in great shape. But like, is it possible? So, so he took all the hard bits of Shostakovich 4 and just piled them one on top of the other. And
I'm looking at it right now.
Which includes a high C, guys. It includes a high C on the piccolo. Held at a long, like...
For way too long. For your popularity in any city.
Yes, that was the workout regime. So week 2 was very scary. I was like, what have I decided?
Oh my gosh, what have you done?
I mean, however, he is absolutely correct. You cover all aspects of piccolo playing, starting with, the first movement. You have some nice, like, upper to mid-register practice with articulation and dynamics. And then you've got some nice top register finger exercises, which is always fun, up to high A. And then you've got some more articulation again, followed by some more top register, and then finishes it off with like a nice flute, a nice piccolo duet. But with soft playing. And then finally at the end, some low register and flutter tonguing. So, I mean, he really does. He's absolutely right. It's just like one of those super extreme workout videos you see in YouTube. And to be quite honest, I was only able to accomplish everything maybe once or twice in that week, like where I felt comfortable that it was decently played. Not even decently, like I accomplished it to a certain degree. But it was, however, I did renew my love for Shostakovich, Fourth Symphony. So I did enjoy that. I listened to that a whole bunch this week too, and it was just nice I just love Shostakovich. He was such a prolific composer, and I wish he had more. I wish we had more music from him, specifically a flute or a piccolo concerto. That would have been nice because his piano concerti are so lovely. Yeah. So my week 2 was very much the opposite of week 1. Like week 1, I was like, oh, this is nice and lovely. And week 2 was just insane Shostakovich. playing as well. Like maybe he says something in the book like, oh, get to the workout section is to be used after so many hours of practicing. But I just followed what he wrote in the contents. And yes, it was very much like, okay, let's set a timer for 30 minutes and see what I can accomplish in this amount of time covering all of these things. But yeah, it was, and I kind of like that he used the excerpts to just make a whole warm up. It was like, here's your workout. Have fun. Just from Shostakovich Symphony No. 4. I think on that note, we might already be to our verdict. Jen, what's your verdict? Did this book change your life?
Verdict. I mean, it is amazing and cool, and I do enjoy it. I think this book is a really amazing resource for someone who's serious about wanting to play the piccolo in an orchestra. I mean, just the information you get and all the excerpts you get given. And then, like, at the end, they give you an audition list of the ones most likely to appear in a piccolo audition. And then just in terms of giving you other ideas for playing, like, they have a whole list of chamber music, which includes the piccolo in it, which was awesome. And a lot of the music I'd never heard of before. Stuff for solo piccolo and two piccolos and piccolo and piano, like just a whole section. I think for me, this book is going to be my best resource for when I have an audition on the piccolo. I can go to this and I can be like, oh, this excerpt's here, this excerpt's here. This is the speed. It's in this section. So this probably means that they're looking for this. Yeah, as you said, because all the warm-ups and all the exercises are kind of interspersed between some very challenging orchestral excerpts, I think I would recommend this more to someone who is very serious about getting better at their piccolo playing and already knows kind of how to problem solve a lot of things on the flute and therefore the piccolo, or are working with a teacher who can guide them. That's my feeling. It's you kind of have to hunt for the exercises. You have to know what exercises you're looking for, and then of course, as you mentioned, you need Trevor White's book to know half of the exercises which you are supposed to practice every day. Apart from that, really, really useful. Definitely staying on my stand, and this I think is something which I will just keep coming back to. And I mean, if I could play all of the excerpts in this book, which would be freaking amazing, I would probably be very set at a lot of the very tricky corners of a lot of the orchestra repertoire out there. What's your verdict? Okay, so my verdict. I think that if you're taking the piccolo seriously, then you should definitely buy this book because it's a great source of just general like tempo markings for excerpts for the piccolo, which aren't commonly found because piccolo is the piccolo community is a small community, and also a lot of their advice is very helpful and oftentimes funny. They have lots of little jokes interspersed throughout the method. However. Like I said in the first week, I would definitely recommend you have this as... It felt like very much this book was an additional method to his omnibus, like practice the omnibus. And then if you're doing piccolo, have this one on the side to help guide your practice for the piccolo. So it didn't feel like a method in its own right, like Beaumontier's did. Like his was like, this is what you do if you're going to be a piccolo. And this one felt like... This is what you do if you're a flute player and you have to play the piccolo. But like you said, the orchestral excerpts are super, like they go into depth. And I like that at the end he has a whole section just dedicated to which excerpts are on what pages. Because I was a little worried at first that he wouldn't have that, and I was like, well, then how do you reference this if you have an audition coming up? You have to search through the entire book and like guess. Okay, I think this would be in the middle register tone exercises. They have it listed at the back, so that's definitely useful. Check that out if you're prepping for an audition.
And then I would say also, if you're using this book as, orchestral excerpts, definitely check for the errata before playing. So, and for people who don't know what errata is, it's just misprints in the book. Because I did notice, because I did look at the Delibes Coppelia in Mr. Beaumadier's book, and I looked at it also in this book, and they each start on different notes. One starts on a G sharp, and one starts on an A sharp, which are definitely not the same note.
No.
I referenced it with a bunch of the orchestral excerpts that I've been given, and it does seem as though the one with the A sharp is more often requested. But I would, these are all books, they're all very helpful, but definitely check which ones use which notes for each one, just to make sure that you're not practicing it wrong, to ingrain that habit in your brain. And then, I would just say that, like, overall, I wasn't super impressed with the user experience. Like, I found it a little harder to find each section, and I would have liked it a little more clear cut. Like, okay, now, like, here's the exercises page. Now, here's the excerpts page, and then reference why they chose which excerpts, which I think would have been kind of fun, because
Mm.
sometimes, like you said with the week one, where you had like which one was it? The Shaw students was super fast. Rimsky-Korsakov, thank you. It's like, what is this doing in the middle of register tone exercise area? And so a few instructions, I think. I mean, we can kind of infer, okay, maybe they wanted us to practice it a little slower, or just make sure that the intonation when you do have ending notes is on point. But for someone, I could see that really turning somebody off to the piccolo who's very new to it. So I would like a few extra notes in there. Like, I love their notes. I just want more notes. But yeah, that's my verdict. I'm definitely keeping it. I'm so glad I have this method, and it's amazing. So much good knowledge.
Absolutely.
I just want more notes and a little more separation of exercises and excerpts. So I think that wraps it up. Woohoo.
Nice. I think that does. Another week. Another Odyssey completed.
Exactly.
I guess that wraps up our episode for this week. Thank you for joining us on another Odyssey. If you have any thoughts about these books, you've tried them yourself, and you have any thoughts you want to share with us, you can contact us practiceodyssey@gmail.com. You can find us at all the usual places. The music from today's episode was composed by the amazing Alessandra Woods, and our fabulous artwork was by the amazing Ivan Potter-Smith. I'm Jen, and I've been joined by Alex, and thank you again for joining us this week. We'll see you in a fortnight for another Odyssey. See you then. Bye, guys.